The Henry VIII slide sequence is one of my favourites. It contains a lot of learning elements within it. So let's just remind ourselves how it actually looks when it's running in slideshow mode. Okay, so first things first, if I go to the slide master, you'll see that I've placed the two common elements in the slide master, the background and the box with the title in. The most important thing when you're doing a slide sequence like this is to always start with the last slide first. That way you can ensure that everything fits on the slide and you can design it exactly how you want it to look. Let's talk about the images. You can see here that I have used the image of Henry VIII and the images of his 6 wives. These are all free to use because they are in the public domain. Let me show you what I mean. If I go across to Wikipedia and go to the page which deals with the wives of Henry VIII, you can see as I scroll down past each of the wives that the picture that I've used on the slide appears on the right hand side here. And if I click on one of these pictures, it takes me through to a larger version, but also the button that says more details. And if you click on the more details button and scroll down, you'll see this section called licensing. And it tells you here that this work is in the public domain in its country of origin and other countries and areas where the copyright term is the author's life plus 100 years or fewer. So this clearly was painted several hundred years ago, and so this image, along with all of the other images of the 6 wives, is in the public domain and can be used without any licensing problems at all. That also, of course, applies to the image of Henry VIII and, incidentally, the image of the curtains in the background, which is a detail from the portrait of Henry VIII. So to start off with this slide sequence, what I needed to do first of all was to gather all the data that I needed to set up this kind of timeline in the circle around Henry VIII. And here is that raw data showing each of the wives and the months when they were married to Henry VIII and the months when that marriage ended. Also includes sections where he was not married. And I've broken this down into, as you can see here, into numbers of months. And then what I've done is I've created a PowerPoint chart, a pie chart. If we go to the data for that chart, you'll see in column 1 here that this contains the months which tally up to the months shown in this data on the left-hand side here. You can also see that it contains an extra 15 at the bottom, which isn't part of this data. And the reason for that is if we go back to the final slide, you can see that there is a gap I wanted to leave in the timeline. So it starts here on the top right and ends up here on the top left. So how do we convert this PowerPoint chart into a format that can be used on these slides? What I'm going to do is I'm going to Control-C, copy that chart, and I'm going to hit Control-M to create a new slide. On the format background, we're going to hide the background graphic so that it remains white. And then on this slide, I'm going to go to Home, Paste, Paste Special, and paste it in as an enhanced meta file. That's effectively a graphic object that can be ungrouped. And that's exactly what we're going to do next. I'm going to go to Arrange on the Home tab and click Ungroup. Up comes this message, so we'll just click yes on that because we want to convert it to a drawing object. And then I'm going to go Arrange Ungroup again, just so that it ungroups it into its constituent parts. I'm then going to remove everything I don't need, which I think also includes, as you can see here, this invisible frame. And then we've got everything that we need for that chart. We can then go ahead and take off the outline, and of course we can change all of the fields. What I need to do is to group it again. I'm just going to zoom in on it, and I'm going to rotate it so that that grey section there, which is the 15 figure for the gap, is at the top. And I've done that visually. You could do it by working out the figures and doing it mathematically. It's probably not quite right there. It probably just needs to be moved slightly over that way. Then we can ungroup it again, and we can delete that pie slice. And you'll see if I scroll right down to the end of this presentation sequence, if I remove Henry VIII, you can see underneath are those sequence of pies that I just created, but obviously recolored in the key colors that I've used for each of the wives. So having done all of that, it's then just a matter of putting together the slide sequence. You can see that I've used a picture of Henry VIII with a black glow around the outside, and all of the wives have an outline on the picture, which is in a key color. So Catherine of Aragon is yellow, Anne Boleyn the pink, and so on. And I've used grey in the sequence where Henry VIII wasn't married. So once I've created this slide, we can then go back and start adding the animations in. So going right back to the beginning here, you can see that the first slide is simply Henry VIII and this large pie. Now this was created by using the partial circle shape. Quickly show you how to do is hold down the Shift key while you're creating it. You can drag the pies round. And what I would have done is matched it up with the pie chart here in terms of its positioning and size. And then you can see from the shape here that what I've done is I have made it white and given it a transparency, as you can see here on the right hand side, of 20%. So you can just see the curtain underneath through that pie slice. On the second slide, which I'll go through in a minute, you can see that Catherine of Aragon appears, and the slide transition is morph. So if I click on the morph transition, you'll see that she appears from the middle of Henry VIII's face. And that's because on this slide, unseen, just about round by his nose, is that picture of Catherine of Aragon. But it is set to a transparency of 100%. If I change that, you can gradually see her appearing over Henry VIII's nose. So what happens on this second slide is that that picture morphs out from the center of that circle effectively and appears on the right hand side. And that's what happens on all of these slides. So if I go to this slide, that little circle there is actually a picture of Anne Boleyn. Again, if I change the transparency, you can see that. So let's take a look at the animations on these slides. If I go to the animation pane, you'll see that there are no animations on this slide, but when we go to the next slide, there are a bunch of animations. First of all, this text box saying 1509 appears on the slide. Then the group, which is this yellow segment, wheels around. You can see it's got the wheel animation applied to it. And then with previous, this text box appears, fades in over a duration of 5 seconds, along with the text box at the bottom here, which also fades in with previous over a duration of 5 seconds. And then this scroll down the bottom here also fades in, this time over a duration of 5 seconds as well. And finally, this text box 1533 appears at the end of the animation. So if we play it all in preview mode, you can see how that works. If we go to the second of these kind of slides, you'll see if I click on the pink segment there, it's a freeform segment, whereas that first yellow segment was a group. And you may be wondering why that is. Let me explain that very quickly. If I duplicate this slide, and I'm going to select all and just delete everything apart from the yellow group. If I ungroup that, and I'm going to do it by keyboard shortcut Control-Shift-G, you'll see that there's two shapes. One of them is the yellow segment, and the other one is this invisible circle. If I go to Format Shape, you'll see that it is an invisible circle because it has no fill and it has no line. Why have I done that? Well, the reason being is that if I take this partial circle here and apply the wheel animation to it, it animates in a kind of strange way. The reason for that is that it wheels from the center of the shape, and the center of the shape in this case is about here, whereas really we want it to wheel from the center of the circle. So by grouping it together with an invisible circle, when we apply the wheel transition, you'll see that it wheels from the center of the grouped object, which is now the center of the circle. So following the animations on this slide, we then go to slide 5, which if we go to the animation pane, you'll see has no animations at all, but it has the morph transition applied to it, as you can see. And what happens is Catherine of Aragon and the scroll morph to the position where they end up on the slide, and then her name appears small underneath that picture. And we continue in the same vein. We have this very small picture of Anne Boleyn, as we've said, and she morphs onto this slide. And again, we have the same sort of animations. The date comes on first, followed by the segment here, which is, if we look at the animations, is on a wipe up animation rather than using the wheel. Then we have Anne Boleyn's name appearing and the dates. Then we have the beheaded line appearing and the image of the axe, and finally the final date. So it's the same on all of the sequences. So we can go through and create the whole sequence fairly quickly now that we know what we're doing for each of the images on the slides. Until we end up, of course, with this final slide showing all of the wives, all of the dates, and all of their fates.